Brought to you by DK Audio.
DK Audio presents DK Life Stories, Alexander Hamilton, by James Buckley, Jr. Read by Joseph Balderrama. Dear listener, you're probably listening to this because you've heard of the musical about Alexander Hamilton. But his story is much more than snappy lyrics and people dancing in wigs and ball gowns. From his birth on a Caribbean island to his death in a duel in New Jersey, United States, Alexander believed that he had a special role to play in history. He was determined to make a mark on the world, and in the American Revolution and its aftermath, he found a way. Intelligent, well-read, determined, and stubborn, he used his power with words to help create a country that continues to work pretty much like he said it should. In this story, you can relive the beginning of the American Revolution, find out Alexander's place in it, and discover that his greatest love was his honor. Alexander was a complicated, intense person who lived one of the most remarkable lives in American history, one that's really worth singing about. James Buckley, Jr. Chapter 1. A Bumpy Start. Alexander Hamilton had a tough start to an amazing life. He lost his parents as a boy, but he overcame tragedy to do great things. In about 1750, a man from Scotland set out to make his fortune in the New World, which is what Europeans name the Americas and the islands around them. James Hamilton left his home in chilly Scotland for the warm and balmy island of Nevis in the Caribbean Sea. He was not alone. Thousands of people from Great Britain and other countries in Europe had traveled across the Atlantic Ocean in the previous century. The New World was brimming with opportunity, from Canada in the north through the English-owned lands that would form the United States, to the islands dotting the Southern Sea. On Nevis, James met a woman whose parents had been among those who had come across earlier. The woman's name was Rachel Fawcett, and her mother was English, and her father was French. She had been married, but a rare thing for this time, she and her husband had got a divorce. According to the laws of the colony, being divorced meant that she could not get married again. However, she fell in love with James, and they became a couple, and then they became parents. What is a colony? Any land or territory owned and controlled by another country. The island of Nevis, where Alexander was born, was a British colony at the time. Having children without being married was frowned upon in those days. Children born in such unions were called illegitimate. These children started life at a disadvantage because they were in a lower social position than their peers. In other words, people looked down on anyone who was illegitimate. Caribbean colonies. Who owned what? The Caribbean is made up of many islands. Since Europeans arrived in the 1500s, the nations of that continent have controlled some or all of the islands at various times. During Alexander's time, the Caribbean colonies were mostly controlled by Great Britain, France, Spain, Denmark, and the Netherlands. Nevis was a British colony. St. Croix was a Danish colony. James and Rachel had two sons. One was called James, and the other was Alexander, the hero of our story. Alexander was the younger of the two boys, and he was born on the 11th of January on Nevis. He said he was born in 1757, though one record suggests it was 1755. The Hamilton family moved to a nearby island, St. Croix, when Alexander's father James got a new business opportunity. Unfortunately, not long after they moved, James abandoned his family and moved to another nearby island in 1766. Rachel and her two young sons were left all alone and in a terrible situation.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?